I am so excited to have Ghazala here today because I think Ghazala has such in these. I always feel like debate is so polarized. Debate is always sort of led by certain factions, certain people, or certain, it's always the noisiest wheel. And Ghazal is always, I've always loved her writing, even before her book, where her brilliant book came out, is because she's always been thoughtful and she's always been nuanced and she always thinks quite very deeply about any puzzle she's trying to solve. And she takes you through her thinking process. And which is why I found your book so valuable, is that you took me through how you were thinking it through as a Muslim woman. So I'm going to kick it off with my questions, and then please take the opportunity to start putting your questions in the comment box. So the first question I have is, how do you negotiate that being a Muslim, being a woman, being an Indian of a certain class, um, and then of course there's region, right? It's very complicated to be an Indian in general. There's so many things going on, right? And there's caste within Muslims too, as there are within Hindus. There's also region, there's language. How do you how do you negotiate all those different things when you speak in a book like that about being a Muslim? Where do all those other identities of yours play in?
Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for this opportunity. I'm very, very excited to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the next hour or so. This is a wonderful question, and I've actually wondered about it myself. Before I started to write this book, or actually much before that, before I even conceptualized that there's a need for a book like this, we as Indians, you mentioned, juggle several identities. And I was juggling several identities as a journalist in the national capital and working in an area which has traditionally been considered a male preserved defense journalism. So there were the identities of being a woman in this area. There was an identity of being a woman from a certain background, which was not a military background. I'm not a military brat. Then the family, business family background, that kind of puts additional baggage on your thinking, your mindset, because you come from a certain milieu which is different from others who are pursuing defense journalism in India. So I never thought that my identity as a Muslim was interfering or was actually overpowering any of these identities. So when I started to conceptualize this book, my Muslim identity, or the fact that I was a Muslim, was just an additional layer to all these things that I had accumulated over the years. And I thought it would give me a vantage point, both an outsider's view, having been not writing on these issues, as well as the insider's view, being a Muslim, having been brought up in a Muslim household, with a mix of practitioners, some very liberal, some very conservative. But it just so happened that after the book has come out, somehow this one identity has superseded everything else. And now it seems like anything I say, whether I'm commenting on subject pertaining to Muslims in India, or if I'm commenting on government policies, the first the prejudice that I face is primarily driven by the fact that I'm a Muslim. And everything else, until now, I was being looked as a woman. So my abilities to comment on certain things were questionable because I was a woman. But now that doesn't seem to matter any longer. Now what matters is that I'm a Muslim. So my gender is suddenly secondary, which has been more dominant until now. I don't know if this answers your question. But
so do you regret writing that book then? I mean, do you regret that somehow this has, all the years that you must have put it into your career, writing about so many things, and now suddenly it's about you being Muslim?
No, actually, I do not regret writing this book at all. In fact, I'm very grateful that I got the time and the opportunity to work on this book the way I did, that the publisher stood by it. And my office colleagues, everybody gave me that space to work on this, travel for the book. So I'm very grateful for all that. I think everything that has happened now in the last year and a half is only because of the book. Suddenly, a lot of people who were ignoring me earlier or who thought I was not worth their time because of my gender or my non-defense background, they are looking at my earlier writing to see if there is something they can find in it which can point to my being a Muslim, so which is why I was critical of a certain thing. So I think it has put a light on my earlier work also, and my earlier book, which I co-authored with Praveen Sani, who's the editor of this magazine, Dragon on Our Doorstep. I'm told by my publisher that even that book is doing very well. It had kind of plateaued when it, after a year, it came out in
You did
2017.
it with Praveen. Praveen is not a liberal at all when it comes to national.
So, uh, no, you're confusing. I'm talking of Praveen Sahani, who's the editor.
Sahani. Oh, I was thinking Praveen Swami. I'm like, wow.
No, no,
Okay.
no, 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 that's a different person. So now that there's a renewed interest in that book, and the publishers are also plugging that as a book which I have written, though I was a secondary author in that book. So now, so I think all this has worked out very well for me personally, and for the debate it has started in India to some extent on the Muslim issues. And I think maybe this book has contributed to that discussion. At least that is the feedback I have got.
So I read your column in Mint on the hijab controversy. So I'm interested in, because that is very much, I think, that intersection, right? Muslim and woman. I'm not going to tell them what you wrote. I'm going to leave it to you. You know, why should I paraphrase? I'd love for you to share your take on the hijab controversy in Karnataka and how you see it, and how these two different identities kind of play into that.
Uh, See, the hijab controversy in Karnataka from day one, I was convinced was about politics. It had nothing to do with women's right. It had nothing to do with Islam. And that is what I wrote in my article, that because it's a political issue, it has to be dealt with in a political manner. It cannot be, Muslim men or Muslim wannabe politicians who were raking this up in Karnataka. There were names of the groups which came out subsequently. They cannot be fighting using women as human shields. Uh, Whatever politics they were doing at the students' level, university level. So that was my major point in that article. And the subsidiary point, I mean, which was a really not really the main argument of my article, was that Islam doesn't lay down specific identities either for men or women. You can wear anything you want, you can do whatever you want. I mean, as long as you profess the faith, as long as you accept the Shahada, I mean, which is the first kalma, you are a Muslim. Unlike Sikhs, where identity is integral to the Khalsa Panth. In Islam, it is not so. A man can wear a beard of a certain length or not wear a beard and still be a Muslim, wear a skull cap, not wear a skull cap. A woman can wear a full face covering hijab, or not full face covering hijab, just a headscarf or just a dupatta on her head or nothing at all. And it doesn't in any way impinge upon that person's Muslimness. So this is what got everybody's goat, and people started shouting and screaming me down, saying that I have no business talking about this because Islam lays down very specific rules for women to appear in a certain way. In my book, there's a chapter on women where I have dwelt on this, and I have dwelt on the three verses which were revealed one after the other, and which are used by men and some women to justify a woman's necessity or a woman's duty to wear a hijab. And in the book also, I have argued that these verses, the first two of them they address both men and women, and only the last one addresses only women, and they were circumstances specific. They were under siege. There was a war going on, and the women who used to go out to relieve themselves at night were being accosted and harassed by the bandits and the all antisocial elements which were roaming around that area. So this verse was a circumstance-specific verse, and the reason I said this and I interpreted it like this is because it says that it concludes by saying that if you go out if you cover yourself up and go out, then you will not be recognized and you will not be harassed. So it was dependent on the fact that you are facing harassment, so you need to cover up. And you would be identified as being Muslim. So people who were harassing you would then worry of fear reprisals by the Muslims. If the women were harassed, they would fear that the Muslim men will come and take revenge or whatever. So that is how I interpreted it. The interesting part about this whole hijab business is that the details of how a woman needs to cover up is not mentioned in the Quran. It is mentioned in a lot of subsidiary texts written by Muslim men. And there is no unanimity about how they need to cover up. There are texts which actually say even the nails should not be visible. The women should cover their hands in such a way. And a lot of women wear gloves so that even the fingernail should not be visible. Some say that even the eyes should not be visible, so they should wear a mesh over their eyes. So there are all kinds of texts which have come over the period, over the last few centuries, talking about this. So reading all this, my conclusion was that it was an Arabian practice that women should either be doormats or concubines, or they should be harassed, done whatever bit. They should not have a position of equality. So when the Prophet of Islam was trying to give some sort of equality to Muslim women, and the third verse, the chain of narration of the third verse also says that he was being advised by a lot of his senior people who were accompanying him, the early Muslims, that we need to put some cover on women, and women should not be allowed to go out in the open. The Prophet continued to resist that. He did not want that to happen. And this is recorded in the Islamic, historical records, which are compiled together as hadith. So he resisted it till the last moment, till this verse was revealed. And then he said, okay, so under these circumstances, women should cover themselves up. But how they should cover themselves up, it is not specified. So my position has always been that this is a matter of women versus men. It's a patriarchal issue. Arabs have been a patriarchal society. Most parts of the world have some form or the other of patriarchy overriding women's interests. And this is what was happening even in Karnataka, that the women were told by the men that this is an issue you must fight for. This PFI, or the organization which was spearheading the resistance by women, obviously they were telling them that is Islamic, you must do this. This is a matter of women's, your rights. So all sorts of issues were enmeshed in a issue which was essentially politics.
So, but do you think this replays all the time? Like, so, for example, I'm old enough, for me it was Shabano, right? The case where actually, where the Supreme Court said that Muslim women should have the same rights as any other Indian woman when it comes to settlement and alimony. And Rajiv Gandhi basically, he called it, how ironic, called it the Muslim Women's Bill, and basically stripped Muslim women of certain rights that other Indians have. And how does that pressure, I think so it's not just, it's happening today, right? It's happening continually where a lot of battles get played out on around women, like these political battles. And they pretty much seem to determine what women can or cannot do. For some reason, they don't seem to determine what men can or cannot do.
Actually, I just take you back to this women's rights bill, Muslim women's rights bill, which Rajiv Gandhi government passed. It actually circumvented the ulama and ensured that Muslim women upon divorce got a lump sum payment from their husband. So actually, he did good for Muslim women, and a lot of women subsequently have got compensation. Sorry, you saying something?
No, that's wow. Like, I think, like, even for someone like me, I had no idea, because I've always been told that Shahbano was like a big, even in feminist circles, it's seen like a big sellout of Muslim women.
No, it was when the Rajiv Gandhi government overruled the Supreme Court verdict. I mean, refused to accept the Supreme Court verdict. But after that, the government passed this act. I learned about this when I was researching for the book, and a lot of details about this act and how Muslim women were empowered by this has been given by Flavia Agnes, who's a women's lawyer based in Mumbai. And she has been working in this area for decades. And I do not offhand remember the details of the act. I have mentioned some part of it in the book. But basically what happens is that in a Muslim marriage is a contract. So once a divorce happens, the contractual obligation on either party ends. So a man is only supposed to pay for the upkeep of the women, an amount which is fixed, until it is determined whether she's carrying his child or not. So that's a period determined as 3 months, by which time the pregnancy can be established without any doubt. So now what happened was, what this act did, that it did not fix the amount that the husband has to pay to the wife, but it fixed a percentage, that this is a percentage the husband has to pay the divorced wife, and it has to be paid within this period of 3 months. And that amount was a percentage of his earning. So it was almost like as any other would compensation after divorce. So in that respect, that money which a man was to pay a woman, it is called iddat, that period of waiting period, that amount was fixed to his capacity to earn. So it was not that a man would get away giving 15 rupees or 500 rupees and go scot-free. So that was one thing which this act did. But yes, I agree, Shahbano was again a case where politics was played by Muslim conservatives who were trying to, create instability within the Rajiv Gandhi government, using a Muslim woman as a forefront. And unfortunately, it did nothing. Even this whole activism by the feminists at that time, or by the ulama, everybody, it didn't really help the cause of Muslim women, because even after the compensation was given to Shahbano, she refused to accept it, because then she said that she didn't realize this was against Islam, and people told her to go along with it, and she went along with it, but she refused to accept the compensation. But there's another very interesting fact which I would like to bring out, and that is Shahbano's had a number of children from this person, and the oldest child would have been in early 40s when she filed this case. Yes. And she filed the case under destitution because she was unable to keep body and mind together, and she was unable to look after her children. She was in her 70s. Her children were in their 40s, and she was seeking compensation to keep her and her children, for them. So it was politics from day one. But unfortunately,
I had no idea. Yeah.
So I was intrigued when I was reading about this case, and one of his kids are still there and in Gujarat, and He gave an interview, a very pitiable interview, saying that everybody used my mother and everybody used us for their political gains. And in the end, we got nothing.
Mm, mm. Which always happens, I think, in India.
Yes.
Sarah has a follow-up question. Sarah, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. You spoke about how a lot is in the current times, like, your Muslim identity supersedes everything else. On a flip side, do you think more than ever you also feel the need to talk about being a Muslim right now? Or is it just coincidental that you wrote the book and it just happened to be?
No, I feel not just me, but I'm realizing a lot of people are also talking about Muslim issues which are affecting Muslims in India. I think we are living such through such times that any sensible person will have to talk of these issues. And it's just so happened that the book has come out at this time, which gives me a lot of credibility to talk of these issues, so that I'm not shouted out of the public space if I'm saying something about a Muslim issue. So in that sense, the book has been extremely timely. I would have, at least on social media, I would have been talking about Muslim issues because of what is happening all around us. But with the book at behind me now, I mean, almost behind me, it's over a year now. It gives me some sort of a platform to speak from. And some people, I hope, do take me seriously when I'm talking about these issues, because they feel that maybe I have uh, some background to the subject.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Dravida has a question. And
I'll open my video also.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a question for you. More basically, I need some ideas. I'm working with an organization in a non-profit. It's called Moms, Mothers of Muslims, actually. Okay. So their problems are very different. These members, they have families, they have, domestic violence. There's typical issues, which are there for most of the women. So they do event, they meet once in a way, they talk to each other, and they have this sort of get-togethers type of things. Beyond that, they are not able to move forward. Do you have any suggestions, about how I can help them to, get some ideas to do? I mean, this is more a very, very general, broad question. I am not able to converge on a specific stuff. I just want to hear from you if there are any good ideas to, raise and so on. So
Dravida, can I ask exactly what they're trying to achieve, the mothers of Muslims? What do they want to do?
basically, they want to, they want to get together. They want to share their challenges. They want to share that there is some basically a shoulder to cry on, shoulder to listen to. Otherwise, they live their own regular lives and so on and so forth. And so they started like this about 10 years, and they help each other. For example, if a child is not somebody taken care, they live in their house, or more like social support type of things they do. Okay, suppose a old person is in the house, not able to, or to be taken to a hospital or something like that. They do these sort of small things they do actually.
Then why is it only Muslims? I mean, these are all issues which would affect all women in India.
Very true. Absolutely. Your question is very valid. I was telling them, why don't you integrate with any other women's organizations? These forms are very common and so on and so forth. This person is a Shelley, is a founder. I can share this network link with you to look at it if you want to do that. But, I was telling these problems are very common to every woman, every family. And why do you want to separate? Why do you want to show it very different? Because why do you want to get this? No, because we require focus. I'm based in New York, actually. So,
okay.
and then she says, look, I need to help my people. There are a lot of gaps are there. They are not able to. Skill development is one area. What is skill development is a huge piece, you know very well. Skill development is not an easy piece. And then a lot of money is required, infrastructure is required, and things like that, and so on and so forth. So, but still, they have been there for last, I think, I think for 10, 15 years, but they have formalized a LLC in about 4 years back, actually. Okay. Somehow I've been asked to, help them, mentor them, and so on and so forth. That's
So maybe the question here is like, I think you've written about this, Ghazala, is that the increasing isolation of communities from each other, that Hindus and Muslims don't really grow up with each other. It's sort of your religious identities increasingly become a way for, where Muslims are getting more and more isolated. I think that's the word you said as well. Is like, so I think maybe this is a question of like how on the ground, how could you build bridges and how can communities come together, especially, this is a question of women, come together and sort of and build on their religious identities and still have those, because the point you made is very valid, that, it's not as though this, one of the first few stories I did was about H-1B wives who were suffering terrible domestic violence in Silicon Valley because they were not allowed to work. This is before the laws changed, right? And they were completely at mercy of whoever they happened to marry, typically not someone they knew very well. Now, this is like 20, 30 years ago. So is there a way that there can be bridge building? And I think that's what Dravida is saying, like, can there be bridge building with other women organizations, and how would they go about that, and how would that fit into them being Muslim as well? Or is there a fear that they would be, their Muslimness would sort of set them apart? Or do you think this isolation is self-inflicted? Or what where do you see this?
Lakshmi, thank you very much for clarifying. I absolutely appreciate your support.
I don't know if I can answer this with any measure of insights, or if my answer will be useful, but I can, I personally feel that we should not be slave to our religious identities. So wherever there are issues where there's convergence with other people, we should always try and find that convergence, because if we are for instance, if it's a problem with women, if there is a problem with domestic violence, then it's a universal problem. It is not a religion specific problem. I mean, no Muslim man would beat the wife saying that the Quran gives me the right to beat you, or well, Muslim man would deprive the wife of food or clothing or right to work outside the house or have a career on the grounds of religion alone. I mean, they will do it for various reasons. So, and this would be something shared by other people as well. As far as the aspirations of women are concerned, for their children, for their parents, for the elderly in the homes, looking after their health requirements, again, all universal subjects, all universal issues. As far as only sticking on or holding on to the identity is concerned, then in that case, probably there is a need to get out of the gender restrictions and then seek a like-minded community of Muslims, men and women, where you can go talk about your religious concerns. If you have questions pertaining to some aspect of religion, then you can talk about that. So I think maybe there is a need to broad base this group of women. They need to engage with women of other faith as far as social issues are concerned, and then probably they can engage with the local mosques or local Darul Qaza, which is like a small informal Islamic court. And there are a lot of Darul Qazas all over India, and every district, maybe not every district, but in most districts, there is one Darul Qaza which is run by a Qazi who gives you advice on religious matters. So they could go there, share their concerns. This is what I can say.
Sure. Pia has a question. Pia?
Yeah, hi, let me just switch on my video. Hi, Ghazala.
Hi.
I
Hi.
look forward to reading your book also. Okay, so my question is basically how, in a country, especially where Muslims are not a majority, how can you be a better ally if you're non-Muslim? I'll just make it a little more specific. I mean, a few years ago, I don't know if you remember when there was something against Priyanka Chopra's Quantico show, and there was something anti-Indian, something. Obviously, people found something, and somehow someone wanted to trace it back to a writer who was identified as an American with Bangladeshi roots. So I had the opportunity to talk to her about this whole thing, and she said that it's really difficult to be a Muslim woman in America right now with a public facing kind of a thing, because on one hand I get these horrible death threats and this and that from white people, now Hindus and all of that. On the other hand, in the liberal circles and the circles who would I would think are my allies, the kind of oppression say I have faced in from my family, from wanting to come out of not wanting to wear a hijab, wanting to marry a non-Muslim, and my struggle, that seems to get invisibilized because of the politics of social media, the things you shouldn't be saying. Let's not talk about it. So in a situation like this, for a non-Muslim person who wants to be really there for this thing, and especially in public conversations, like you said, you got shouted out. So how can you be like a better ally? What are the things I think you should really not, you should shut up about, and what are the things you maybe should talk about generally? We really care about women being visible and their
The first thing that everybody should do is just keep an open mind. Even if there are things which you think are horrible about another person or another religion, or there some of the practices which you think are, not civilized enough for your liking. Keep an open mind, ask questions. I think everybody likes if somebody shows interest in their lives, in their religion, in their faith, in their lifestyle. And if you ask question because you have a preconceived notion about something, they'll be happy to answer it to the best of their capabilities. And this is what I have experienced in my life. I have had a lot of friends who came with some prejudice baggage from their families, but they were very nice and open about it, and they shared their prejudice with me. They told me, "Oh, but my grandmother used to say this. So are Muslims all like that? Is it true?" And a lot of times I didn't have the answers to their questions, and I would come home, ask my parents, and go back and tell them, "Oh, this is how it is." Of course, nobody is perfect. No religion can be perfect, in the sense that there would be things which some people like about a faith, some people will not like about a faith. But we also have to put things in context. What is the time period? What is the period when we're thinking, or we think this religion came about? When were these precepts written? What was the society like at that point? So, if you have open mind and you are vocal about your openness, that is the biggest support you can give to any Muslim who feels misunderstood, or who feels that everybody is ganging up against them, or downright persecution by select group of people, or even by the state. So, I mean, you don't have to stick your neck out. You don't have to go and stand in front of a person if he's being or she is being attacked. But this understanding that you know where this person comes from, what his or her limitations or strengths are, that itself goes a long way in showing solidarity.
Thank
So,
you so
but do you
much.
also think that non-Muslim liberals sometimes do damage? Because, for example, on the hijab ban, there was a very sort of almost, I would say, cutter kind of line, where in many ways that because I feel sometimes that the complexity or the diversity of Muslim views gets lost because it is primarily, I see this particularly on Twitter, where it's a conversation very much between a sort of hard right and, kind of very left. I mean, and, they may be coming from the good place or the good, but sometimes does it do more damage than allowing Muslims to speak for themselves and sort of, think through these issues and say, well, there may be many different views within the Muslim community about the hijab thing.
I think I wouldn't say they do more damage, but sometimes I feel that they kind of coalesce or they kind of align on not or very solid grounds. Maybe there is a case for them sometimes to just step back or maybe speak with some people before forming very hardened positions. I'm talking specific to the hijab issue. A lot of people, when I wrote about this, a lot of people and liberal, progressive, non-Muslims told me that it is about a woman's right to her body, to what she wants to wear. How can the government dictate what she wants to wear? And my position was that in a different circumstances, it could have been about a woman's right to her body, to her, exercising of her choice. But in this particular instance, it is politics which is going to boomerang on Muslims and especially Muslim women. My biggest concern was that the way it was playing out, this thing will go out of hand and it will have a cascading effect on all other state governments, which we saw people or institutions which had no problems with hijab earlier suddenly started having problems. And we had very disturbing videos of school teachers who had been wearing a burqa to school forever being asked to take it off at the gates. Now, all these years, it did not happen. But when the issue was joined in this manner and the issue was taken to the court, I mean, it was obviously a very wrong framing of the issue also. But nobody at that point, because the temper was running so high and everybody was jumping with their own opinions. So that is where I feel that we need to, if we do not understand what is the reason for a particular issue being raked at that point, there is no harm in just stepping back and maybe observing for a few days before voicing your opinion or before jumping in with your support or your banners.
But that's great. Actually, that's a great, and I think social media has just completely taught us to give us our latest hot take and our knee-jerk reaction, and then we get completely, rewarded for it because that's the one that goes viral, right?
Yes.
And then, okay, so Anish has a two-part interesting question. One is about Rana Ayub, and one is about how different it is to be a Muslim today as opposed to, in the past. Anish?
Yeah, hi, Ghazala.
Hi.
Just a really quick, not really quick question, I guess. Just your thoughts on, Rana Ayub's perspective that we're going severely downhill when it comes to our treatment of minorities, especially Muslims, and just your perspective on how much worse is it to be a Muslim today in India than, let's say, 10 years ago, around the idea that, I feel like as a country, our secularity is being threatened. And I think that's something that I really want to get my head around and understand better and deeper outside of the political. This is political. You can't really ignore the politics, but yeah, as general and also as general citizens, what can we do to ensure that, the politics doesn't seep into everyday life of these these interfaith interactions.
The first step would be to recognize and accept the fact that secularism in India has been mostly a lip service. Our society, our public spaces have been deeply Hinduized from the time we got independence, and a lot of things which were part of our culture and even Muslims. I also grew up treating those things as cultural things, lighting of an auspicious diya, or not having non-vegetarian food shops open on a Tuesday. There were a lot of things which reciting of Saraswati Vandana in school, or earlier in a convent school, reciting of the Lord's Prayer. So our public spaces have always been religion driven because we are a religious society. And for a lot of cases, a lot of instances, we have passed on religious practices as cultural practices. which is fine as long as it doesn't stop other people from practicing or exercising their religious have practices in a public domain. Now, nobody had objected to these things. I mean, even now, I'm very happy to recite the Saraswati Vanna or, lighter. Even I would think it's auspicious. I mean, whether I believe in it or not, but I have no problems lighting a auspicious diya to inaugurate an event or to crack a coconut before inaugurating or starting something new. So these things have been part of our society, just as the namaz on the public spaces, on the roadside, on the roads during the Friday afternoon prayer or Eid or Bakrid prayer. All of this coexisted, nobody had a problem. Now, once you start having problem with one thing, then you have to recognize that where the injustice is coming from. And I'm not even going into the violence part because that's a completely different issue altogether. That's a criminal act. So I'm talking of how intolerance has crept in our society, and we don't realize this at all. So if you are saying that certain things are now assertiveness on the parts of Muslims, and we have been tolerating it, then you also have to recognize that there are a lot of other things which have been going on, which, let's say, Muslims have been tolerating. But we were not tolerating, we were coexisting, and we found harmony with both of them together. We lived in a harmonious environment without realizing that this was actually interfering in our everyday life. I know a lot of people who have got so used to listening to the azan 5 times a day that their routines were planned according to that. With the early morning prayer, they knew, okay, this is the time to wake up because it's almost 5:30 in the morning or 4:30 in the morning. Or evening, the last prayer, they would do, okay, the kids have to come back home now, that it's a evening prayer, the late evening prayer, the Maghrib prayer. So it was not just the Muslims, even Hindus or Christians, whoever lived in that area where the mosque was. And this another thing which we have to understand and appreciate is that when people object to the fact that Muslims are praying on the roads, the thing is, if you have an open mind, you'll wonder why they all have to go and say the namaz at the same time. Why can't they just sit in their homes and do it? Because Islam or Quran says for men, and this is not applicable to women, but for men, all men, and this was a measure of their imposing equality on all men, that they should say the namaz in a congregation, and they should stand so close to each other that their ankles should touch, rub against, when they sit down, their ankles should rub against one another. So this was a way of their ensuring that there was no untouchability. So there's a very famous couplet also by a poet, says that during the war, when it was time for namaz, the emperor and the slave, they both sat next to one another and offered prayer. So that is the reason. Now, most Muslim men, they do not say the prayers regularly. So the limited number which goes for the prayer can go to the mosque and say it. But a Friday afternoon prayer is considered some very special prayer, and large number of Muslim men who do not pray every day want to say that prayer, and the mosque cannot accommodate that number because there's a limitation of land. How much land can a mosque take for so many people to fit in there on a particular day? So that has been the reason why traditionally all administration allowed Muslim men to pray in public space for those 30 minutes during the Friday prayer and the Eid prayer, which happens in the morning once a year. Now suddenly this has become objectionable, and you have started saying that this is encroaching the public property, this is coming in the way of my independence, my right to my fundamental rights are being encroached upon by this display. So this is where your everyday intolerance comes in. Your everyday intolerance comes in when you're talking about Navratri, and now suddenly all beach shops cannot be, you have announced that beach shops will not be open during Navratras. So that is where the intolerance. I mean, if you are not going to be eating non-vegetarian food, why should you impose this writ on others? So to accept that and recognize this, that yes, when I'm demanding this, I'm also displaying intolerance. I'm also displaying intolerance in the name of my practice of my religion. So I think this is what has been happening. Uh, this has become very, very rampant, widespread, and in a lot of cases, the lawmakers and the state itself is complicit in fanning this intolerance in the society. And this is what Rana Ayub talks about when she says it is becoming increasingly difficult to be a Muslim in India. Now, if you get to the criminal element of it, if you get to the fact that there are threats to Muslims on a weekly basis by somebody or the other, there are videos being shared on social media of talking about annihilation, killing, and raping of women, Muslim women. Uh, all of this is unnerving. Many people can just shrug and say, these are fringe elements, don't take them seriously. But if you are at the receiving end of this threat, and if you have seen some element of this threat being carried out, whether it's a crowd getting together and beating a Muslim man to death, or somebody just getting in your house and throwing things around saying what kind of meat you have in your house, then you can imagine how a Muslim would feel when he or she listens to these threats on social media, or sees these videos, or finds his or her neighbor or driver or domestic help watching a video which says that Muslims must be killed. I mean, I have personally experienced, I was traveling for work, and I had hired a daily cab, a full day cab. And after one of my appointments, when I came back into the cab, the driver didn't know that I was a Muslim. He was listening to one of these videos which came out of this Haridwar Dharm Sabha. And it took him at least a minute before he could turn it off and get to the driving of the car. So he was listening to that video. Now, I don't know how he would be thinking, how he would be processing that information. So this is disturbing. So I think it's easy to dismiss this as fringe if you are not at the receiving end. But when you are the target of this sort of even verbal assault, then obviously you will be insecure.
And I think Anish's second part of the question is like, what can we do, right?
I have already answered it in the sense that please keep an open mind. If you find something objectionable, ask about it instead of just shunning it. Maybe some kind of conversation can start, and maybe your misgivings can be
What about
addressed.
people who actually, watch this and feel mostly powerless, right? I mean, at some level, the people who are in this conversation have great privilege, but I always say very little political power, right? We are not people who decide elections or outcome of elections. So, on an everyday basis, what do you think in our daily lives? I'm not talking about social media now. In a daily life, if you're running a business and you have, Muslims and Hindus, or you're in a community that includes Muslims and Hindus, or you're in a workplace that includes Muslims and Hindus, what is it? Because you're talking about daily intolerance, and I think that's interesting, right? Because the violence gets a lot of attention because it's so in your face.
Yeah.
But the daily intolerance of, like you said, whether it is, oh, I won't rent to a Muslim, or, oh, now mosques are like, intruding on children studying for their exams, or whatever it is. In that day to day, what is it that you can do? And you don't expect, I heard you, that you don't expect people to be heroes and put their bodies in line.
Yeah.
But in a day to day, like, what is it that you could do? Because mostly, I think a huge reason why I think people shut down is because they feel powerless. Because they feel, well, what can I do about this?
Uh, I have heard from a lot of people who say that I have quit my family WhatsApp group. It was very toxic, or I have quit my uh, old schools or old school WhatsApp or college, university WhatsApp group. Everybody is very toxic there, and there's so much of hatred there. I say to these people, don't quit. You stay there. I mean, it's toxic for you despite being of the same, let's say, background. Uh, Maybe you, because of your background, you can start some conversation with them. Maybe you can engage with them. Maybe you can tell them that, look, what you're saying or thinking is not correct. Uh, I think the only way we can de-radicalize our society at the moment, and I'm using the word de-radicalize with a lot of caution. I feel what we are facing in India is massive, mass scale radicalization of the Hindu community. Um, Hindus have always been extremely, I would say, tolerant, but that's a very, it doesn't convey what I'm trying to say. They have been like a sponge. They have accepted, admitted everything. And there's so many practices which they have adopted from other faiths and have internalized and have made their own. That is one of the reasons why so many different religions came into India from outside and found ground here. They grew here, they expanded here in not just the numbers of adherents, but also in ideas. In my book, I've referred to Indian Islam. And what I meant by Indian Islam is because Islamic thought which developed in India was only possible in India because of this intermingling with the Hindus of India. This cultural cohabitation which happened. It was only possible here, which is why the practice of the Muslims in India is very unique. It's very different from what Arabs do or what Indonesians do or what North Africans do or Central Africans do. It's very different. So that is the reason. So if traditionally you had the capacity, if majority of Indian Hindus had the capacity to understand, appreciate, and coexist, cohabit with others, how is this capacity shrinking now? Suddenly, what has happened? It's not that some jadoo tona or some black magic has been done. So obviously, mass scale radicalization has been going on for a long time, which was below the surface. We didn't realize it was happening. And suddenly in 2014, when there seemed to be some sort of a state sanction, it just started crawling out of the woodwork. So that is the reason why we need some sort of de-radicalization at the grassroots level. And everybody has to play his or her part in this. Whatever your access, whatever reach you have in whichever small group, in your family, in your workplace, you try and engage with people, you try and address their fears. The radicalization has been possible because it fanned on certain kind of fears. So like, for instance, even yesterday, there was some television debate on the growing number of Muslims in India. I don't know why out of the blue, suddenly one television channel had to debate this, that the Muslim population is growing rapidly as compared to others, when this is a complete lie. I mean, Government of India statistics, the National Family Health Surveys have established that the fertility rate amongst the Muslims is actually lower than upper caste Hindus. So everybody knows it's a lie. You just have to Google it and you'll get the statistics. But even yesterday, one news channel did a show on this. And obviously the panelists were arguing, no, Muslims don't do family planning. So what I'm trying to say, all facts are available. I did not take very long to write my book. My research did not take very long. I mean, travel and interviews took a little time, but the basic research didn't take very long because all data, everything is available. It was in my room. I mean, I was just sitting on my computer and Googling it. And the Government of India statistics are available on the government websites. The Ministry of Home Affairs has statistics galore. Ministry of Family Welfare has statistics. I mean, every Ministry of Minority Affairs has so many data, such important data. So it's not difficult that you should argue this without evidence, because evidence is all there.
Yeah, and
Thank you, Ghazala.
and actually the funny thing is, because I'm South Indian and I live in South India, South Indians complain all the time about the North, that they get so much political power because they keep having babies and they have no family planning. They get more and more in the parliament. They get more and more. Like, why are we being punished for the fact that we actually don't have as many? So it's like so South Indians have their own kind of commentary about the North Indians, irrespective of religion.
Actually, I was in Hyderabad last 2 weeks back, and a few people were talking, and they're saying that, given the way things are going in North India, I think South should just secede.
Yeah, well, the South is very cranky these days. Well, apart from Karnataka, which is sort of the outlier. Akanksha has a sort of, she takes the question, she flips it on the head. Akanksha?
Thanks, Lakshmi. So, Ghazala, I'm just going to keep it very quick because I feel like you covered this general area. But what do you think are things that are potentially actually harmful or not, or maybe even dangerous to do, right? So, for instance, I feel that some of the things that we do in a well-intentioned way, possibly saying, oh, I'm going to promote my friend X's business because telling everyone saying go support, buy from her because she's a young Muslim entrepreneur, right? And that's the kind of thing that we heard a lot in, like, I think to some extent it's also rhetoric borrowed from like BLM, right? Like buying, supporting or something like this. So, and I wonder sometimes, like, is it not kind of sort of tokenizing and insisting on an identity, on a fixed identity in one case, and making hyper visible possibly some identities which people may not want to always advertise, right? So my question actually is that, do you think there are things that you're better off not doing, even if you think it's going to be helpful?
I agree with you completely, because this also draws attention to that person, which and the wrong kind of attention. So I agree with you completely that there are certain things where specifying a person's identity or reaching out to a person only because of identity is not correct.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I suspected as well. But I thought it'd be good to get your thoughts.
Srini has a follow-up question to what Anish asked. Srini?
Yeah. So Ghazala, my question is pretty much what I wrote. So the current government, Modi government, has created an environment where nobody wants to be seen sympathizing with Muslims. Okay. So what would you advise younger Muslims for the future of India, in India where it could be Modi, Yogi, or someone similar?
Actually, there's nothing much that Muslims can do, because they are so much at the receiving end that everything, all the proactive action, all the ameliorative action have to be done by the non-Muslims. They have to kind of reach out to other non-Muslims as well as to Muslims and ensure that there is a measure of security, the measure of equal opportunities, which is being taken away, some semblance is restored. So there's nothing much Muslims can do, honestly speaking, except that keep their flock together and ensure that they're not victims of violence. Basically, keep themselves safe.
So then what does that mean then in this era of bulldozer politics? Then would you tell Muslims not to go out and protest? Because, in some states, it's not all states. I think we confuse, certain states with all of India. But then what do you do if you can't protest? What are you going to do?
No, I'm not saying they should not protest, but I'm saying that as far as getting provoked can be prevented, they should not get provoked. There are certain times when you cannot help but get provoked and react. But for instance, in this particular case, after the slur on the Prophet by BJP spokesperson, I didn't think there was a reason for Muslims to protest the way they did. The truth is, we all Muslims or all Muslims who believe in the Prophet, they seek shelter with the Prophet, and they think that on the day of judgment, the Prophet is going to save them from the eternal fire of hell. So the Prophet is supposed to save the Muslims. Muslims don't have to save the Prophet. I mean, Prophet's reputation is what it is. Why do they need to take umbrage every time somebody says something about the Prophet? I mean, if somebody is saying something to your face, you can tell that person to shut up. But to risk your life, your, as they say in Hindi, roti, rozgar, jaan. I mean, to risk everything to only register a protest or show how angry you are, I think it's a foolish thing to do. You should protest where protest is required. If your livelihood is attacked, you must protest. If your life is threatened, you must protest. If your education is getting threatened, if you're being denied admissions, or if you're being told that a certain group, certain kind of schools only would admit Muslims and no other schools would admit Muslims, then you must protest. You must protest for your constitutional rights. When Muslims are protesting against CA, see how widespread it became. It was worthy of protest. It was an issue where there was no choice but to protest. But on something like this, I don't see why you should protest.
I think it becomes then like, so this is how it seems to go, right? Because when, and this is the difference, like actually, we don't seem to have a differentiation between the fact that actually ordinary Hindus don't come out and get agitated about, if you said something about Ganesh, or if you said, it is very particular gangs with particular political ideologies who come out and want to create fear that you can't say anything about Hinduism or whatever. Forget about Hinduism, whatever offends them, whatever they decide on that day, they wake up and they say, okay, this is offensive, and now you're going to pay the price for it, right? And it becomes a sort of, well, if you can go and do that, then how dare, people talk about the Prophet and get away with it, right? That you can see why it would. I'm not saying it's wise or not. I think you're right in saying it's probably not wise. This is not where you spend your political capital, because political capital for a minority is precious.
Yeah.
It is, you can only spend it in certain ways, which is pragmatic. But you can see why it would get frustrating, because it's not happening without context. It's happening in a situation where, these Hindutva groups, like anything you say about, even indirectly, about any god in any way, somehow, becomes a reason to beat people up.
I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. My only contention here is that when you're protesting to a purpose. If you think your goals are being met, then you risk your life, your time, and you invest your energy in that. But if it's only for the sake of protest, then that luxury Muslims do not have. I mean, because in any case, as you said, the political capital for that Muslims have is extremely scarce, and it's precious. So you save on that. But there is a little context to this, as opposed to any other religion. A lot of people think that there is a thing called blasphemy in Islam, and anything said against the Prophet is blasphemous, which is considered blasphemous, and it calls for punishment. That is not correct. A lot of Muslims also believe that blasphemy is an offense which needs to be punished. The truth is, there is no concept of blasphemy in Islam. This was a civil law. The law of blasphemy, where a person would be beheaded or killed for saying something nasty against Islam or the Prophet of Islam, which what we see in Pakistan happening quite a bit. This was a civil law imposed in Arabia after the death of the Prophet. This is not integral to Islam. And this civil law, a lot of people have taken it from there and they have put it upon themselves as an Islamic law, which it is not. So because of this, a lot of Muslims feel, or Muslim ulama feel, impelled or compelled to immediately jump up and issue a fatwa and denounce anything which has been said against the Prophet, and instigate people to come out and protest and demand action, which is incorrect.
Sure. That's so. Well, ZT, you can't be ZT, man. You have to like a woman who you have to.
I'm sorry. My name is Zoya. And my question is that, so basically there's this theory that Samuel Huntington posits that, like there is a clash of civilizations that's basically going to be the reason why most of the wars that's going to happen after Cold War is it's going to be because of religious, like a conflict in religious identities. But there has been a lot of debate on the fact that, like for example, currently the war between Russia and Ukraine is not because of religious identities or cultures, but because a clash of ignorance of sorts. So do you I want to believe the fact that most people are, they believe in diversity, they believe in, pluralism. So do you think the world, like the future, our future is going to be dystopic, where the world is going to be divided because of civilizations and religious identities, or there's going to be, more people are going to be more accepting and, basically... I want to hear something positive. But more based on truth.
Okay. I'm very pleased that somebody has raised the question of Samuel Huntington. A lot of people keep referring to that, and they talk about present with reference to what Samuel Huntington supposedly presciently wrote, but it is incorrect. It was incorrect even then, and it has been overtaken by so many things in the world since then, as you refer to Russia and Ukraine. The clash of civilization was a very Western concept, and it comes from this unending crusades which the Christian world waged against Muslims, the newly Islamic community in Arabia and North Africa, even parts of Europe. And this idea, they have, in various formulations or permutations, they have continued to regurgite. The truth is, the mass scale warfare in the world has never, except for crusades, has never happened because of religion. Everything has been about either territorial expansion or hegemonic aspirations of a particular nation. Whether you see this entire chaos that has been happening in the Middle East since the beginning of the 20th century, or what you now see in Eastern Europe, the expansion of NATO into Eastern Europe, again, nothing to do with religion, or you see in the economic warfare between the US and China, nothing to do with religion or civilization. So I think we are, I don't know where we are headed, whether there will be more conflict or there will be less conflict, whether there will be a more interdependent, economically interdependent, interconnected world, or there will be hegemonic powers trying to assert oneself over others. But one thing is certain, what is happening in India because of religion is today unique to India. This is not what is governing or determining international relations or international politics. So there is no clash of civilization outside India. And even in India, what we are witnessing in the shape or in the form of religious violence is driven by political ambitions.
Right.
So it's not the religion which is dictating perpetual conflict.
Right. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure listening to that answer.
No, thank you so much for
asking. I also find it very ironic when white men sit there and say it's a clash of civilization, and the two world wars have been white Christian nations basically forming each other to death. Honestly.
Yes.
It's not exactly a clash of civilizations. I always find it very convenient that it is made about it. So one more question. Honestly, we're not going to keep you for very long. We already kept you for too long. I'm just going to go to Sumer. I know the team has questions. I'm sorry, guys, but this is the last question. Sumer, you want to ask your
Thanks.
question?
Thanks so much for including this question. I was just wondering whether, whenever people feel threatened, there is a desire to assert your identity more. And growing up in Delhi in the 80s and being from a family which is from Old Delhi, I don't recall seeing this much hijab wearing, for instance. Now, I don't know if it's true. It could simply be that I never paid attention earlier. But what's your view? Do you think Muslims in India feel the need to assert their identity like Muslims in Turkey did once? I know Hindus do now. There are more Hindus wearing tilaks than ever before. But and of course, they are threatened according to them. But what's the scene on the other side?
I agree with you completely. This is a new phenomena. While Hindus may be doing it for whatever reason, I don't know. But there are two reasons why Muslims have started to assert their identity more. One reason is that there is a consciousness amongst Muslims that there is an Islamic identity and they must wear that identity on their person. A lot of this thinking has come from Saudi Arabia, which has been trying very hard to export its version of Islam to the rest of the world. So you see a very monolithic form of Muslim community emerging in various parts of the world, largely inspired by Saudi Arabia. So that is one reason why even in India, you find Muslims asserting their identity or at least wearing it on their person. The other part is that in the last 8 years, because of this sort of vilification on the basis of their identity, when people in the government say "kapdo se pehchanenge," so they have become, it's on rebound that they have become more assertive of their identity. People who otherwise do not wear a hijab, women who don't wear hijab on a daily basis, now have started wearing it at least on social media or at least on special occasions to showcase that this is my identity, take it or leave it. So I think there are two things which are at work here.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ghazala, for giving us your time. It's been a brilliant conversation. I think Subhash feels like he hasn't been heard because he's a minority from JNK. And confirms his fears that we have run out of time. Man, you were at the end of that very long line, and it's 6:45. So please send us your questions. We pass it on to Ghazala. She'll be happy to answer it. And I'm sorry that you feel that you weren't heard, but it's a very first come, first serve kind of situation here. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Lakshmi, and thank you, everyone. It was absolute pleasure.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.